It's the power of Christ.
The power of Christ compels you.
Hello and welcome to Frequency Broads. I am Tara and I'm here with my lovely co-host Victoria and a friend and coworker of mine, Jeff Mallinson. Jeff, welcome to Frequency Broads. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I am so delighted. We love your stuff at our house. I was thinking, I know I may have mentioned this when I first ran into Tara at the school. My only complaint about Tara is she already had all of the bases covered on the things that I really cared about, like with the mindfulness and the oracle cards. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? So now I'm all having to go deep into the deep cuts like paleography and Latin and audio production. So,
Good,
but
because I
it's
know none of that.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. So we wanted to bring Jeff on because Jeff, not only do you just have the most incredible stories that I've ever heard, even the kids repeat them. They'll be like, "Did you hear this Jeff story? Did you hear this Jeff story?" But I just felt like the frequency and energy at which you just like generally rock with is exactly what we're looking for. And I think you have a really interesting perspective on life itself. You've had a really interesting life, and I'm excited to look at this topic today. We're looking at resentment. So I'm excited to see it through your eyes. I know Victoria and I touched base on some subtopics that we want to look at in resentment. It seems like the three of us are kind of on three different pages. So I'm interested to see how they
Interesting. Good.
interlock there.
Well, that's the great thing about this. I would really say that the concept of resentment within various spiritual, philosophical, and religious traditions is really delicate. I mean, or I should say, intricate, nuanced, hard to really nail down because you could almost make a case for two different approaches in almost every world tradition, and they're
Yeah.
compatible. But it's a hard thing to talk about. It's an important thing to talk about, though. So let's
Mm-hmm.
do it. That's great.
So we love to start this season with a little bit of a freak check, similar to a vibe check, but your frequency. So I guess we'll open up with that. Victoria, let's start with you. How are you feeling today, my love?
I lost my voice last week, so I'm so grateful to have it back in time for this episode. Um, Tara got to see me kind of mid last week, and I just sounded like a child. It was so frustrating because I had my best friend in town who I got to spend the weekend with. She officiated a really beautiful, lovely wedding. The bride at the end of the night told me that she listens to Frequency Broad. So shout out to Westby.
Yes.
Congratulations on your beautiful wedding and marriage. But I'm feeling good. I feel like attending a wedding always just reminds me of how beautiful the celebration of love is. So I'm feeling high on love.
Oh, I love that. Love that for you. Jeff, how you feeling today?
You caught me at a good day because I think on Friday we had this run. You know, it was like a raising
Mm-hmm.
money, running laps, and I my workout is yin yoga, and then if I'm tired, it's restorative yoga or just sitting meditation. Like that's my work. Like that's what I would put into that space. So all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? I've got this other colleague, Chris. I don't want him to lap me. So I kind of conceived of him as a bear chasing me, and as long as I didn't get lapped, I was going to do this. But I hadn't run, I hadn't done cardio. I mean, I'm embarrassed about that. I mean, I should, but I just kept going like I, was 20 years ago. Just went right back to it, and then that evening, I ended up doing the side gig where we set up like 1,200 candles for these string quartets in town and lifted all these heavy
Wow.
boxes up these stairs. So by this morning, I was having a hard time moving. But fortunately, my partner Stacy works at a wellness center where they have healing arts, massage, cupping, acupuncture. So I get a deal at that, and it was already on the docket. And it reminded me of how sometimes I'll go just because I can, or there'll be an open space, and it's not as helpful because I'm not as pained in my body. And I was kind
Mhm.
of reflecting as I was getting my massage today about how, and I don't want to go too far with this because sometimes it makes me angry in spiritual circles about, like, the importance and the value of pain and stuff. Sometimes pain just sucks. But there was
Yeah.
this level of deep, I'm feeling this kind of deep satisfaction for having worked hard. And maybe I'll get to later, why why I'm doing so much of this extra physical labor. But it just felt really satisfying to release all of that. So I'm feeling this
Mm.
kind of really nice euphoric release of all that pain. But the point being, a massage is extra specially good once you're in a little bit of soreness, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now I got to go find my new ways to get sore before I go get a massage. I got to find a reason to get the massage, right?
Just work out just to get the massage, like, that's the
Yeah,
only
Love
reason.
that.
not for any other reason. Just yeah, that's how I roll.
I'm right there with you, hence why I didn't come to the Raven Run. I was
Oh,
like,
you missed it. Okay,
I don't need to
that's
be
good.
there."
That's good. That's good.
But I'm glad you're feeling sore, I'm glad you're feeling motivated, that's
Yeah,
good.
that's perfect. Yep, good
Yeah.
spot.
For me, I'm also feeling really good. As we've said in the last couple episodes, I've been going through a lot. Speaking of like sitting in the discomfort, I have been sitting in the discomfort. So it's really interesting to be coming not fully out of that, but a little bit out of that, and then looking at resentment. But currently today, I am feeling really good. Actually, mini story, I just came back from food shopping and my entire cart was filled with produce, and I felt really good about that. And I'm looking at the woman in front of me, no judgment. I get it. She was given mother of three boys vibe, you know what I mean? And it was just a cart of like soda and processed foods and snacks like that. And I wasn't judging her. I was just like, damn, this is what we feel that we're only capable of doing because of time and money. And just as I was feeling really proud of myself for like just focusing on like not processed food and like really wanting to step into whole foods and making everything that is in my freezer and whatnot, the woman behind me goes, I want to treat you to some kindness. And I was like, oh, okay, what? Oh, sure. And she gave me a $10 off coupon. And she said she specifically looks for people who are eating properly and not getting processed foods and like all this stuff. And I was just like, oh, and so not only did it feel perfectly aligned with what I was just thinking, but on my way home thinking about it, I was like, wow, that was the first time that like I didn't feel uncomfortable to receive. Like
Mm.
I wasn't like, "Oh no, I don't need it. Like save it for someone else." I was just like, "You know what? Thank you. You intentionally thought to give it to someone and that someone was me, and I'm going to take this abundance and feel grateful for it instead of uncomfortable." So, I'm feeling really good right now.
Hell yeah. That's beautiful.
Thank you. You know, I've been really pushing everyone to focus on their relationship to receiving. So, it was just interesting to see that and feel that. Okay, so resentment. Victoria, I took a play out of your book and I looked up the definition of resentment. I don't know if you already planned on saying that. Were you going to do that? No? I
I
was like,
thought about
yeah.
it and I'm like, I can't.
I was
Thank you
like,
for
let me
doing
get
that
her.
though.
Okay, wait. So I want to clarify resentment because then when I was thinking about resentment, my brain got into regret. So I want to clarify the difference between resentment and regret, which I'm sure both will be talked about today in some capacity, but we are focusing on resentment. So, resentment is unpleasant emotion or feeling bitter because of having being treated unfairly, or resentment arises from something being other than what you thought. So, kind of like similar to disappointment, right? Like you have this expectation or this thing that you're waiting for and then it doesn't happen or it happens in a different way, versus regret, which is focused on actions that have been or have not been taken, right? So the way that I can kind of perceive it is resentment is to do with kind of not only unfairness and unbalance, but your perception of how others are treating you, versus regret is kind of more focused on yourself and how you take action in the world, right? Does that make sense?
That's good.
Mhm.
All right. So let's get into it. Jeff, you already kind of mentioned the way you're going to navigate resentment today. So, why don't you get us started? What's been coming in your field when it comes to resentment?
Yeah, if you don't mind, maybe I'll tell a little bit of my backstory because it plays into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was born, my parents were following some variety of gurus in Boulder, Colorado. Before it was all suburban, and I was conceived in a tent. They eventually thought, since it was I was going to be born in December, they were going to build a house and buy a house. And but that was the world I grew up in. I went to an alternative school, the full hippie scene. And then when they sold their house, they ended up um, realizing, oh wow, I really like capitalism and I like the system, And so they switched from being
Mm,
hippies to the classic yuppie thing. And most of my life was kind of trying to figure out what went wrong. And so when you go to the that question of expectations, I had these certain expectations of living with this kind of communities in um, a more of a like mountain scene, and then I find myself right in the midst of Orange County, California. Now, my parents were not religious in the sense of like institutional religion, but when they got there, they soon realized that the cultural scene there, to their surprise, actually, they thought the left coast was going to be very radical, but it wasn't, especially in that part of the world. Reagan comes into power, and a lot of the
mhm,
Democrats find a kind of a joy in excess consumption, and this is going on. So anyway, they put me into this religious school, a very conservative, fundamental Christian school that was really just horrific for me. It was just a terrible experience, really
mm,
changed my perspective on the world. But it was that my expectation for being able to just be free, be myself, that's what I'd been taught. And then all of a sudden there was this whiplash. My expectations were totally changed. And now it was, no, you shouldn't be laughing. This is not godly. This is, all this stuff.
mhm.
I I ended up running away from school, partly because they would whack us with a little cricket bat that had holes in it, and they called it the Board of Education. I mean, it was pretty serious.
Oh my
But
god.
the biggest reason is on Fridays. This is what's kind of ironic about Tara and I doing the music on Fridays. I did music on
Mhm,
Fridays at a private school that was run by fundamental Christians, and they had this song with a synthesizer where you're supposed to put your hands up in the air and say, in moments like these, I lift up my hands. And I said, in moments like these, I just shrug and be sad. So they gave me
yeah.
detention. So for like 2 months, I was just stuck in detention. I couldn't talk. But ironically, since I couldn't talk or couldn't move, I was just sitting in the lotus position practicing mindfulness by accident, you know. And I came
Mm,
to this I came to this spot where I said, well, what I really should do is um, I should really understand the inner workings of this thing that was new to me. I was going to understand the workings of American Christianity, which I didn't really realize at the time was actually, at least the way I see it now, is part of supporting all of this capitalism in that form. So if I'm ever sounding like
right.
I'm being very disrespectful towards anybody who's Christian, um, they're about what I've come to realize as a scholar of it. There's just almost just a myriad of different versions of it that are really different, such that you almost have more similarity between mystics, like Richard Rohr in a Franciscan tradition, or Eastern Orthodox kind of mystical Christianity, that has almost more in common with some forms of Hinduism and Buddhism than it does with other kind of dogmatic religion. Don't want to get too much into the weeds, but what that meant for me was I was going to go on this quest to figure this out. Um, but also I
Mhm,
was feeling like I needed some kind of support network as I had moved into this space. So I really did fall into the church world of the Jesus freaks that had come out. Like, this was the hippies baptizing people in the Laguna Beach and so forth. What it really did, though, for me was it gave me the sense that what my life purpose was. I had this idea. My life purpose was to understand it well enough to be able to change it from within. This starts in
mm,
1986. And to the point of my resentment, um, along the way, I end up investing my whole life into this silly project. Almost, you could say it was I would have said it as a chip on my shoulder, but it really was a resentment
mhm,
of the pain that I felt, and I noticed a lot of other kids were feeling in this world. But I never actually got
mhm.
out of the world. So I was still kind of in it and trying to change from within. And thanks for letting me share that longer bio part.
Yeah,
But what I
of
realized
course.
was part of what it was I came to realize that not only were there ideas that we had received that were traumatizing, and I resented those. And then there were just people that were very strict and mean, and that was a resentment that I carried with me. And it just became my identity, right? Like my identity was
Mhm.
to say I'm the guy within the system that's pissed off about these other things, but we can fix it. We can change it. But the reason this really is interesting to me that we're talking about resentment here is that part of the problem, it seemed to me, was this concept in Western Christianity, especially related to the concept of forgiveness, which can be very healing,
Mm.
but also can be really the worst kind of spiritual bypass and a new
Mhm.
traumatization. Because a lot of my friends who had been emotionally, spiritually, sexually abused were not able to process their righteous rage about what was wrong. And so they said, "Well, you should forgive. This is what we do." And I came to realize, like really late in the game, that I really couldn't change it from within the system if the concept, if the construct of the world is you're basically a wicked and sick, terrible person, but don't worry, we put this blanket over you and you're forgiven. Also,
Mhm.
queer people, they can come into the party, but they also have to recognize that they're like shameful, but we're going to cover them. And also there's creepy pastors and youth pastors that are doing bad things, but we're going to cloak them too. And so forgiveness, which I always intuitively thought could be a very helpful aspect of our well-being and consciousness, was just constantly coming back as part of the problem. I mean, there was a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany who kind of came to understand this, and he called it cheap grace, and he was killed by the Nazis because basically people would say, "Well, yeah, Hitler's bad and the collaborators are bad, but we got to forgive people and we'll let it go." And ultimately, as I started to research a little bit more into this and the ways that forgiveness had been weaponized against people who had been traumatized, that I still wanted to recover some of that value of the release of that negativity. And I
Mhm.
think that at least, and maybe you'll have a different angle on it, but at least in one way of looking at it, I would prefer for folks to at least contemplate not using the forgiveness word for a little while, just to set that aside because it's so fraught, it's got so much baggage, but instead to think about it in terms of releasing my need to identify with my resentment so that
Mm.
I can say, just like I confront my shadow self, I can confront the inner rage. I think the realization I've come to finally after all these years, 20 years teaching in church related higher education, um, spending all this time and energy getting a doctorate in religion, but then getting into a system where now I had to just kind of walk away from it, destroy my finances, all of this. I've been pissed off until very recently because I just felt like I was tricked. Like no one told me that maybe that's
Mhm.
not a good career move. Maybe that's not a like the place you want to invest all your time. Or in my more cynical moments, like I'm getting a degree in something that might not exist. Like to the extent it was like
Yeah.
theology or something, which is what they call it in England. In Europe, they'll still talk about theology instead of religious studies. Though what I studied was philosophy of religion in the 16th century. But the key is for me what I came to find is that in these traditions where we're talking about like a certain type of forgiveness being just kind of you know letting these things just kind of be forgotten and ignored
Mhm.
or swept under the rug. There's that sort of thing. Whereas in Eastern traditions like Buddhism and Taoism, there's this idea that no, you're not like your core essential self isn't disgusting. The problem is this delusion that money, power, glory, for me, it would be capitalism, gets thrown into that as well. These things make us identify so much with all of these adornments to our ego. And for me, I've gone on too long, but this is the key. For me, once I started to realize what I was actually doing was feeling very self-satisfied that I was the guy who was like my identity was I'm pissed off by fundamentalists. I'm pissed off by
Yeah.
abusive religion and cults and all that. And so on the podcast that my partner Stacy and I have done for a long time and even earlier, like that had become what we like that was our identity. And at some point it
Mhm.
just wasn't serving us. It wasn't very healthy. We just wanted to say, yes, we judge this thing as problematic in our lives or that sort of thing. And I think when we think about resentment, we let it be a teacher and we say like this resentment is telling me something intuitively that I couldn't really think until I was able to get some space to do it. And
Mhm.
releasing the resentment is ultimately, I think, an important piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to the concept of forgiveness. I mean, we talk a lot about how spiritual communities, alike with religious communities, regurgitate these words and then they have so much baggage or meanings that they don't align with us anymore. And I do think that even outside of structured religion, this concept of forgiveness, we're almost trained and taught to forgive the other person, and that makes you a good person, right? Forgive them, forgive them, forgive them. But really, what needs to happen is when you forgive someone else, you're staying in that narrative, right? Like you were saying, the narrative of I'm the angry person that's mad at the system, or or I'm the victim, right? That's the narrative we have. Who we need to be forgiving is ourselves. I forgive myself for staying too long. I forgive myself for
Yeah.
believing this. I forgive myself. That's who needs the forgiveness. I'm not saying that people don't need forgiveness in general, right? If we're looking at it at a larger scale, but what that word forgiveness now means is forgetting. Is saying, "Oh, it's okay, right? From here on out, it doesn't exist anymore." But we're energetic beings and we have energetic cords and energetic knots that get stuck in the body, and to just say like I'm going to forgive this person and that is not going to still live in the body is incorrect. And then we begin to be resentful outside of that situation to just generalize it and say, "Oh, well, this kind of thing is just," because we're still harboring that because we forgave them but never forgave ourselves. So I think a big part of dealing with trauma, dealing with difficult situations is first and foremost forgive yourself. Accept that hey, it happened and I'm I'm not a bad person for staying there. I'm not a bad person, right? We don't want to re-victimize ourselves and say like I should have known better. I should have Divine timing is divine timing. You learned when you were supposed to learn, and that's okay. Forgive yourself for taking the time you need to get out of the bad relationship, the bad job, the bad religion, whatever it is that's draining and harming yourself. You need to forgive yourself first. Then releasing the resentment from what happened to you or that you were involved in comes after that.
I like that. And thank you because that's a little appetizer of healing for me because that is my biggest thing lately is yes, I'll let go of making my identity the resentment. But yeah, forgiving myself for supposedly, having studied so much and going down such a rabbit hole that like I waste like I think of it in some ways as like 25 years of my life energy was kind of wasted. And I think ultimately, of
Mhm.
course, it wasn't, but I mean, it was, in a practical sense, totally not the way that I should have done it for financial life security. And
Yeah.
that feels
Yeah.
really stupid. Like I feel really stupid, like when I have my negative self-talk about it, it is a thing.
I'm curious, Jeff, where do you feel it in your body?
Oh, this is good. Yeah, I mean, I think I like to talk about to the kids about the etymology of the word worry. And it comes from like gnawing on a bone, like a wolf worries like a piece of somebody's leg. Yeah, it's definitely in my kind of intestines. Yeah, and it's just like burning, tangled up, gnawing intestines, and it's a thing. What does that mean, Victoria? Where is that?
I'm like, it's a thing I'm familiar with oh so
Yeah.
deeply. And I've been observing a lot people who have just any sort of trauma around money, and the effect that it's had on their gut.
Mm,
And I know a lot of people have had to have like parts of their guts removed, and it's
mm,
all stemming from like Actually, the 2008 recession era is when I think a lot of the folks had a lot of gut stuff happen. Um, I think your intuitive center is so predominant in that region in your body. And, I've talked about this before, but I think how you fuel yourself, not only with food, but with your thoughts, end up in your gut. So I think for in your instance, it could be just this thought or the worry ends up being digested or not
Mhm.
digested. It like becomes this kind of like acidic eating away at you sensation.
Mm. I also know that, and I'm not going to speak to it too much because I don't know, but I've learned that each organ holds a very specific energetic frequency for emotion. So I'm interested. Do you know, Victoria?
I do, yes, because I've had a lot of gallbladder liver issues and it holds anger and
Mm.
resentment.
Mm.
And it's really, I mean, your liver is your filter. And so if you're not able to clear out whatever you're holding on to or can't get out of that loop, it's part of what your body is processing and when it's trying to consume nutrients.
Mhm. I also feel like looking at it from a chakra perspective as well. The second and third chakra, right, is about, I mean, as well as your throat chakra, but is about expression. Um, and what I've noticed and what I wanted to talk about was resentment in relationships. And I think what builds resentment in relationships is when we're not communicating properly. So that way, that person is not showing up the way we want them to because we're not. And I'm not putting the blame on us, but that's a piece of it is we may not be able to clearly communicate what it is we're looking for. And then that expression is getting blocked, right? In those areas. And without even realizing, resentment starts to build until all of a sudden you're just like, what the hell? Why isn't this thing happening? Like, why are we still, which is what I've been experiencing and what I'm hearing a lot of people experiencing is, why am I still here? And with my relationships in general, not just my romantic relationship, I recognize as much as like Victoria and I call myself the voice, and I feel that I'm a very good communicator. I'm so empathetic and can so step into your perspective. And with my intuitive gift, I see your past traumas. I feel your energy. So I very much can just quiet myself because I'm like, and I feel, and Jeff, tell me if you feel this way too, but I notice a lot of women do this where we're just like, you know what? Not that big of a deal. Not that big of
Right.
a deal. I'm just going to sit on this egg. It's one small thing. And because I know it's for the betterment of both of us. And over time, that one small thing you're sitting on becomes everything, and then you begin
Mm,
to resent this person, you resent the situation, the relationship you have, and it almost feels too late to say something because that is who they are. That's who you've always known them to be, right? That's the narrative you've been given. It's just this is the person and I've forgiven them for that being that one thing, but really you're harboring this resentment. And it's not until you find your voice in a calm, or for at least for me, when I was able to like let resentment rise, sit in the discomfort, learn what resentment was trying to teach me. What was I resenting? What was I keeping hidden? And then wait until that passed through me to have a calm conversation. I don't tend to do that all the time. As soon as my emotions rise, I'm like, I got to tell you right now. And sometimes I haven't processed it fully yet. So being able to process my resentment and then come and say, hey, this isn't a personal attack on you. It's just, I never told you how I really feel. And even in your situation, Jeff, with religion, not having the voice to say, this doesn't feel right, or being shunned for when you did say, when I feel this way, I don't put my hands up, I shrug and I feel sad,
mm,
right? Like you were
mm,
told, like, shut your voice off. That's where
right.
that resentment starts to build because we're denied our opportunity to change or learn about what's happening. And all we're getting is disappointed over and over because we try to change the narrative in our head and say, it's not that bad. I forgave that person. Maybe they'll show up differently. But how can anyone do anything differently on a large societal scale or your interpersonal self if you're not actively expressing what needs to be changed?
Mm. Yeah, and we have two. There's kind of like two forces that will subtly try to encourage you to do the wrong. I would say like the unhelpful thing with that sense of resentment, and the one is like yourself. If you just say, "I'm going to let it go," then I don't have legal, HR, whatever, societal, my parents, whatever. Once I can just let this go without expressing my voice, and this is again in the kind of the religious trauma scene.
Mhm.
Um, there, like it may just be I make this choice to set it aside and not express my voice because it's just easier, and then it still festers,
Yes.
and that. But then there's the other thing is it's just there's so much praise there's so much praise culturally in certain settings. I remember like every time there was a couple settings where there was like racially motivated shootings, and I am not going to say to people that have experienced that you do not have the right to do this magnificent thing of forgiving.
Mhm.
But you see, like on the news and the politicians are saying, look, their main takeaway is often, look how great these people are for being forgiving, which is great at their level of well being and consciousness. But that seems to allow society to say, well, they've forgiven the shooter, so we don't have to deal with gun violence or racism in
Yep.
America. And that's a real hard thing. And then for Stacy and I, one of the things that was like just like a monster for our relationship was that I mean, we started dating when we were 1991. We met at church, and for reasons you might understand, if you have premarital sex, like you're married. So like we kind of we flowed into like in 19 you kids you weren't even born in 1995. So in
Oh,
1990 were
95.
you?
Yes, we were.
Were you
Yeah, I
born in
was
95?
Oh,
93.
yeah.
There you
I
go.
was
Okay,
born
there you go. So
93.
as you're a toddler, these kids, Jeff and Stacy, are getting married in like the early 20s because that's just like that's what you do. So we didn't know where to place that negative frustration because there were all these things
Mhm.
that had affected our lives, and like it would cause these frictions and so forth. So so like it's sometimes the kids or other people get confused, like, why do you call her your partner? And we like you went to a wedding, God bless it. That's wonderful. You know, like great, do that thing. But for us, the only way we could like really escape from our own mutual resentment, like it was getting to a really, really bad place just because of all that baggage that had come from these things that had been set up by somebody else.
Mhm.
We needed to use our resentment to figure out, well, what was the source of our problem? And the problem was this certain understanding about hierarchy and patriarchy and religion and politics that was all bound up in these literally in the vows that we said about obedience and all this. It was
Mhm.
traditional stuff. Um, but all those little cultural things, like having a father give away the property of a woman to a dude and what that means, then created all this tension because, well, of course, I'm supposed to kind of be the boss, but like I'm egalitarian at my heart, so I don't want to do this. But then I'm being a bad person if I don't. But then if I assert it, so we kind of came to the idea that for us, kind of like setting that whole construct aside, as if we like were kids for the first time, kind of trying to reset what relationship should be, was like the most healing thing for us. And it does again does deal
Mm.
with resentment because we now can talk about all those negative patterns that we had imbibed from a culture that we don't agree with anymore. Certainly after our deconversion from the whole thing, but just culturally, what that means, because there's a lot of secular people that are still in especially Western culture, and well, really, it's all around the world, a certain kind of patriarchal, hierarchical view of the world that if there's any part of you that's not seeing that to be the way the world should be, you're always unable to flow. When you talk about your
Mhm.
frequencies, like these are just it's a cacophony. It's like it's dissonant. It doesn't work. So
I'm like, there's so many things I wanna touch on right now, and I'm like, which avenue do I wanna go down? But what I'm really hearing and seeing, and I've not thought about resentment in this way before, is like it really keeps us in this loop. And it's so challenging to get off or out of the loop and to be able to look at what the root cause is. So I'm so happy to hear that you and Stacy were able to step back and really go to the root of what it was. And I mean, getting together at such a young age is probably another major reason why things probably were bubbling to the surface, because you didn't know who you were at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to get to learn who you are as you're growing together, but it's sometimes really uncomfortable if one partner tends to kind of grow at a more rapid rate than the other. And yeah, no comment,
No
Yeah.
comment.
right?
And yeah, for us, you stretch that over 25 years or something, and that's a journey.
Yeah. I mean, that's a I feel a lot of resentment in long-term relationships is when you're expecting someone to show up the same way that they used to, but we grow and change, and what we need changes. And it's so beautiful that you and your partner, Stacy, were able to talk that through and heal together, because a lot of people get nervous if I bring this up that I want something different or require something different, that maybe they won't love me anymore, right? But then we begin to resent ourselves and say like, why would I want something like that? I should show up differently. I should, right? But really, if it's no longer working, no matter how much you love that person, because you're growing and changing and so is that person, and it just doesn't align anymore, then that's okay and that's beautiful. And that doesn't mean you wasted your time, right? It just means that you learned and you grew what you could together and you move on. Or you're able to talk it out and not have those resentments and say, how do we move forward together? Are we going in the same direction? And that goes for your career, that goes for your religion, right? Always checking in with yourself to say, am I harboring anything? Am I not speaking up about something that doesn't resonate anymore?
And sometimes in the relationship, we use, I think, our resentment as our capital. I mentioned earlier that sometimes we use our resentment as an adornment to our egos. But definitely
Mhm.
in a relationship, especially when we were coming from a world of forgiveness, it was like, well, okay, you're forgiven, but I am the one who forgave you for that really bad thing. So that's a little
Mhm.
badge I put on. And like, why aren't you respecting that enough? You know, and it's very difficult to let go. And I'd say even outside of that world, in more of the kind of mindfulness, more Eastern tradition world, I think the hardest part for what you might call a spiritual path or a path towards consciousness, or if you want to use the word enlightenment, to me, one of the most frustrating things is all of the people that I have so much like anger and resentment for. I do have to kind of let it go, in that I can kind of see with eyes of compassion all of the traumas that led to them being that,
Mhm.
whether it's like an alcoholic parent, or even the people that, look, they were looking for meaning and they thought that the whole universe and me not going to hell depended on them like whipping me into shape. Like, so once I get that perspective, oh, it's so enlightening and so wonderful. And then you say, yeah, but I've got to, like, I can't carry around this little thing I'm hoarding, my resentment, because that's like my prize. That's what I get out of the whole encounter.
Mhm.
Well, if I don't get that, you have to
Mhm.
release that. I mean, that's the whole, path of like non-attachment in Buddhism
Right.
and Taoism, which is like, I just, you can feel it, you can sit with it, you can learn from it, but you can't um, identify with it in the same
Mhm.
sense of like who your true self is. And
I
that's hard
absolutely
because I
agree.
want to do it.
Yeah, and I say it all the time because I've gone through plenty of things, and I can look at someone and say, "I understand what you were capable of at the moment, but that doesn't make it okay, and that doesn't mean that I'm allowing it ever again." But it does give you that piece of enlightenment to say, "Okay, I see your parents were this way and you went into this system and that's why you treated me the way that you did. I get it, still not okay, and I won't accept it, but I get it," right? And we get to release that attachment.
I know, I was starting to say something earlier, and then you started talking, Jeff. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say it on the internet,
What is
but
it?
I'm going to, so fuck it.
Mhm.
um, I, a few years ago, I really felt the power of Christ consciousness. And growing up in the church, I never once felt the energy of Christ consciousness the way that I did um, a few years ago. And I think I have a lot of resentment for just my time pretending to go through the motions, and I
Mm.
felt like I was a pretty intuitive kid, so I was witnessing the hypocrisy of the families and the way that capitalism played in, and how the wealthy families would have their names on plaques and come it'd be a fashion show at church, and, like, it was just a to-do, right? Especially in all of the small towns across America, that is, like, the one way that people come together as a community, so it's really kind of sad on one hand because I'm like, "Oh, that"
Mhm.
like, we all know the power of community, and we need it and crave it and want it, and it has its place, but I'm like, the purpose in which we're coming together is so diluted and just far from this Christ consciousness energy I had a taste of and was like, "Oh, this is what it feels like. This is Christ consciousness." And it I know we don't wanna go down maybe that avenue of religion or Christianity, but I'm curious if you ever had that experience where you're like, "Oh," because I know you kind of took a spiritual path, um, what, probably in your 20s or when you started
Middle school, yeah.
studying
Yeah.
religion?
But
Middle
yeah, like,
school,
but it was,
nice.
but I always knew, like, from that time when I ran away from school, and was chased by the teachers, that I was going to get a doctorate in religion to try to, yeah. So that's the whole. No, I think that's like a really interesting. Do you mind saying what tradition it was that you were part of? Was it like non-denominational
I honestly don't
evangelicalism?
even know. It was,
Was it
like a
rock and
church
roll
of God.
bands or oh, Church of God? Was it Church of God in? Oh, it doesn't matter.
But I bebopped around in my, like, preteens.
Hmm.
I know, yeah. It's a fashion show.
Yeah, totally.
It's really
Um,
interesting to see community come together for control and capitalism
yeah. Well,
because it's not powering. Go ahead.
no, right. No, this is exactly right because what you were saying is when you talk about Christ consciousness, if people like I don't know, like Richard Rohr, for me, there's a Franciscan author, Richard Rohr, that is about as close as you can get to being able to be accessible outside of the tradition or somebody who is deconverted from a certain form of the tradition. For me, I still have I have so much baggage from it. So for me, I'll turn people on to authors or speakers like that. For me, I just like I can't even like have a conference at progressive Christians at a church anymore. Like at least for now, right? Like there's just so much
Mm.
I can't deal with it. But partly it was anytime we did experience that mystical awareness, which is common to all of the best tradition, best of each tradition. It wasn't just that it wasn't there wasn't enough of it on the menu. It was that when you found it, you were in trouble, especially if you were a woman. There was something suspect
Mm.
about that. Like, no, that's too much of a kind of emotive or non-cognitive spirituality, and I mean, meditation was opening yourself up to demonic forces. Um, Anything that was healing in that regard, that you could instantly say, "Well, this is helpful and good for me," they would say, "No, no, no, no," because, and I think they knew that the more you did
Mhm.
that, the more you would start to empower yourself to be aware of what
Mhm.
wasn't working. And so, yeah, it wasn't just that they didn't have enough Christ consciousness, and forgetting about modern authors, you go back to a lost gospel called the Gospel of Thomas, which I do recommend folks read. It's a fascinating thing that they just found in this Nag Hammadi library that had been banned. It like the official church after this guy Constantine, the emperor, um, got rid of all these other versions that were much more, and some of them were wacky in their Gnosticism and weird mythological tales. But this Gospel of Thomas has this great line. So if you split open a log, that's where you'll find me. Or he says to Thomas, the character Jesus in this tale says, like, I'll tell you what's really up, but and then he tells them, and then Thomas tells the other disciples, I can't tell you. You guys are going to kill me because it doesn't fit with all the things that you had been taught. So those kinds of things were like this other part of the tradition, or you could say like mystics like Julian of Norwich, Hildegard von Bingen. There are these characters that come up throughout the history of the medieval church that sound like almost like they sound like Alan Watts or something. They're like very much kind of giving you like an Eastern vibe. and sometimes they would get killed. Sometimes they'd find a way to get in, brought into the system. But for the most part, especially in dogmatic, especially dogmatic evangelicalism, American Protestant Christianity, that stuff is that was just like demonic. You can find a way to it in Catholicism and in the Greek, Russian Orthodox traditions, but not so much there. And if you don't mind, I want to plug. Can I plug just one thing? So Stacy and I went at the
Yeah.
end of this last thing. We did the silliest, most really kind of embarrassing thing, but we for ourselves took 3 years to translate the Tao Te Ching, and it's been done before. But the reason we needed it is we wanted something to memorize for ourselves, but also it was specifically for folks who had come through our own kind of type of journey related to like reframing what like the way we would think about life and what we might call spirituality. And this guy, Lao Tzu, maybe wrote it, maybe it was a collection of people. Just 81 chapters really kind of helped us to unpack what a lot of this was. And I realized it has resentment in it. And this is the very first chapter. It says, the Tao proclaimed as dogma is not the Tao. Well, that's the way we translate it to say, and I should have said it's specifically for people who came from like kind of abusive forms of religion. You could read it whoever you are, but it's that. It's like, it's not just that you disagree with them, but when somebody is trying to force their interpretation or perspective on you in terms of like non-intuitive, non-mystical, no frequency, it's just content that you say yes to because they tell you to. That is not just wrong. It's not it. It can't be it. And it goes
Mhm.
on, words cannot contain the infinite word. An inexpressible reality is the source of the heavens and the earth. The cosmos we label gives birth to the 10,000 things. Now, if you release resentment and longing, you can breathe deep, resting in the sublime. So that's how the whole that's kind of like
Mm.
the thesis to the whole thing. So you recognize there's this something out there. There's this mega frequency, the secret chord, the sacred ohm that's reverberating through the whole earth, and everybody's dancing around it, and everybody's trying to put words to it, and that's great. We're talking, right? Some people joke about this book, like why does the guy start out saying you can't put it into words, and then he has 81 chapters? It's because of course we use words. This is the
Yeah.
dance, but the dance isn't like the thing itself, and so we have to give each other this kind of freedom. Well, a lot of us, especially if you grew up in some kind of high control religious context, that very thing, that thing is that we might say is the healing, enlightening thing, is the thing that you're not allowed to do anymore. At least after 400, B, 400 CE in the Western tradition. But even I would say in a lot of contexts, there's always this ongoing. As a religion scholar, I'd say there's always this ongoing battle between the people that have these amazing transcendent experiences. I would argue often through certain kind of shamanic practices that then once people get all of a sudden their eyes opened, then somebody says, okay, cool, we're going to bottle this. We're going to own it. We're going to put our patent on it. And you don't get
Mhm.
to produce this anymore. So, whatever, like the very same experience that caused prophets and, visionaries to start what we call a religion ends up being trademarked and withheld from all the people that are supposed to be accessing it.
Mhm.
And I suppose I could say I resent that, but I think we could do
Yeah.
better.
I'm like, what is the point of religion if it's not to control people? Because that's been my perception over the past decade or so. I've just seen it as a means to control. And I'd like to have a new perspective on, being deep in the spiritual realm here. I mean, I know somewhat, but I'd like to hear your take on like what's the point of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes fall into the zone of using religion as only pejorative. Sometimes I'll talk about religion as only what sociologists would call a cultural hegemony. It's a way of just kind of getting you to obey without the police watching, right? It's
Mhm.
like what, and religion at its worst is what cultures around the world do when they tell kids about the boogeyman or even Santa Claus. If you're bad and I don't catch you, Santa Claus is still going to be watching.
Mm.
That that terror is culturally, it's a widespread thing. And but ultimately, there are things that we other things we call religion that can be very very helpful, even if, like, I might say myself, I'm not as interested in it. Um, for instance, took some students down to the local Zen center. We didn't participate in any of the events, but they were talking to us about how they'll do these ancient practices of banging drums or reciting a mantra. I mean, for me, if if you really want to understand how, like, religion can be, like, as religion, problematic, but also can be one of the most healing things for me, if I really was in a really difficult state of anxiety, chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, which even, like, monks that have studied this for a long time, nobody really knows what those syllables mean. It has something to do with the lotus flower growing up out of the mud, you know. But, like, if I think of religion as the rituals or the patterns, or like in Judaism, like a Seder feast to remember and recall and to draw together, this is stuff that I think some of us that have left bad religious experiences are lacking because we don't have those cultural elements, because it's hard to untangle, and maybe we shouldn't.
Mhm.
But one of the things, as I've traveled to China and Japan and met with folks in shrines and temples, is there's all of this conversation from, say, secular Buddhists in the United States, where we're all having this conversation, and it's like this really interesting conversation. And then I get to the actual religiosity of it in Japan or China, and it's really just a bunch of, unfortunately, kids that were abandoned by their parents because they couldn't take care of them, to basically say Om Mani Padme Hum because there's nothing else to do, and they're kind of like trapped in this thing that I'm thinking, oh, I'm
Mhm.
going to go to this place and I'm going to find so much power. And I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with this because I recognize it. Because you see the same thing in Ireland 100 years ago, a bunch of young women who might have been coerced into a sexual experience that now they've had to give up their baby, and they're now tarnished, and so now they're nuns, and for the rest of their lives they're singing the psalter, or they're uh, doing the rosary beads. And I say, no, 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 that's horrible, horrible. And then I meet um, some wonderful, like, this wonderful woman I met in Mexico a couple years ago, and she was talking about the Virgin of Guadalupe being this divine mother consciousness, and she says, I don't trust the priest, but, like, I'm really Catholic if that's what this means, right? So for me, if I am very clear about defining religion as a power play, where a priesthood aligned with money and power, really, like I say, money and power and glory are these, like, three. Basically, the short story is human beings were relatively happy. We had our challenges, but just at an emotional level, we were relatively happy as hunter gatherers, and then in small villages. And we had shamans, and we had wise women that we later, might call witches in a pejorative way. But this wasn't religion, but we would see it today as religiosity, or something, maybe, if from a secular Western mindset. But for me, when I use religion as a negative thing, it's just the alignment of money, power, and glory. Glory being the religious side of things. Like, when I was living in England for 4 years, I realized that Anglicans, that the Church of England, um, is really important to society, but no one really believes in it. But it's really important because it reinforces the hierarchy from the king down. It's like
Mm.
it's almost like Shinto in Japan. No one's really, like, that into it, other than it's really important for society, because religion is reinforcing, like, the glory of the loftiness of whatever the ceremony is. We want
Mhm.
the wedding at a church, even if we don't go to church, because there's some kind of magic that we think we're going to get from it. Or in England, I would say ultimately they're kind of worshiping the monarchy in a way. I don't want to put it. I mean, there's some great friends of mine that probably, like, take great offense to that, but there's a way in which um, the, the the idea of people who don't really believe that Jesus walked on water, or that there's even an afterlife, or maybe not even a God, the the ceremony of the thing reinforcing Britishness. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't really realize that until I had been there long enough, where they didn't, like, believe it, but it was essential to their worldview, this religion, right? So especially religion scholars have a very difficult time. If you get four religion scholars in a room, they could go for like 2 weeks debating on what religion is. But most of the time when they get to the end of it, there's no such there's no there's no such thing as religion. It's just like family resemblances between different human cultural practices that sometimes involve
Mhm.
texts. Sometimes it's like hierarchies and priesthoods, sometimes it's visionaries. But you always, the great part is, even though like I had to get out, there's always these kind of like little rebels within the thing that come up with these great, amazing, transcendent insights because they had nowhere else to
Mhm.
go. Where do you go? I mean, especially like in the Middle Ages, if you experience yourself, you say, "Hey, I'm queer. I'm not going to be a part of the military. I don't want to be a part of the military." Like, where would you? I would do that, right? If I'm queer and I don't want to murder people on the battlefield and I don't want to be a merchant, going and just like meditating while I'm, putting, turnips into the ground with a bunch of other people that are praying for the peace of the world, I guess that's your best option. And sometimes it's such a case that it's the best option that I'm reluctant to condemn it all, wholesale.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting hearing the two of you talk about resentment and religion because I did not grow up religious. So I never really experienced that. Like, I went to CCD for like a hot minute and then I was like, Mom, I don't want to go. And she's like, cool, don't do
Mhm.
it. Um, so I was able to kind of see it from the outside, and living with a spiritual mother was able to say, "Oh, this is the capacity at which they're able to understand the great unknown and like be able to learn about Buddhism and Hinduism and like find the links between and say, "Oh, aren't they so dumb? Like they're literally all saying the same thing. They're just like using different words." But at the same time, as I said in a previous episode, I still feel a little resentment just because they took ceremony, they took ritual, and they made it into something so daunting and unempowering that, like, when I want to do these things, like I said previously, like charge my food with good energy, I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm saying grace and it feels weird. And I'm
Mhm.
like,
They
that.
stole that.
And then they stole it. And then I haven't even been religious. And yet I have resentment for these organized religions because I know other people may see me blessing or charging my food and thinking, oh, she's one of them. And I'm like, no,
Yep.
I'm not.
Oh, that's good and sad,
But
but
Victoria, I
good.
know we've looked at resentment towards relationship, resentment towards religion. I think you had another concept, and I want to make sure that we touch upon that as
Oh,
well.
I'm gonna take a page out of your book and bring it full circle
Hey.
because I think it really ties into religion and the fact that, well, I'm resentful that there's so much division in our world,
Mm,
that it's male against female. The list goes on. I'm not even going to go down that right now, but I was reflecting this morning as I was reading the news, like, what would
mm,
be the root cause of war if religion didn't exist? Why would we be fighting against each other? If we were provided for, if we had shelter, clothing, family, everything, what would we be fighting over? But it gets a little trickier than that, of course, because I think resources and religion have been intertwined and used synonymously, but I don't think that's necessarily fair for either the resource, the oil, or the religion, right? Stepping aside from religion, even looking at just male versus female, which I don't like to look at it as black and white because I think we're all a little queer and I think we're all responsible for embodying our feminine and masculine and everything in between. But I work in a male dominated industry where I am paid significantly less
mm,
and I often do significantly more work. So I think there's this resentment that I carry day to day. And I don't want to carry it any longer, but it's like, what do I, for the sake of my sanity and productivity and just living a really healthy, happy life, how do I let go of it
mm.
because it's like we've been fighting for equality for how long?
Yeah.
But is fighting the best solution for it? Doesn't seem to be the case. And it's like, I have so much resentment against the white man. And here I am talking to a white man I admire and respect. And I love men, but it's the men in power who try to control things through their resources, um, or controlling resources, I should say, that I'm like, if we wait for them to die off, it's just going to be their sons in charge, right? So it's like, how do we take our power back?
That is a really challenging concept to think about when it comes to resentment, because thinking about religion, thinking about relationships, like my advice to people was going to be sit in it, figure out the message, and give it a voice. But like you said, how long have women, queer people, people in minority groups been trying to give it a voice, and yet we're getting nowhere? So we're just constantly living in this resentment, because as much as we can say it is what it is, you still don't get to make your bills the way that the same position, but in a male doing it, can. So that is really challenging. And, a piece of me, when you were like, well, what do we do? Like, fighting isn't working. I'm like, what do we do? Walk out? Just be like, no, I'm not. Like, cause that's how it makes me feel. Like, a lot of times where I just want to be like, nope, I'm just not doing this anymore. I'm not doing society anymore. Like,
Mm.
we're done here. But then am I doing a disservice to those who don't have the resources in their own house to say, I'm going to step out of this, right? Or that I'm no longer going to have a voice, because some people don't have the opportunity to share their voice. So that I don't, I have no idea.
And I think earlier this year, you've watched me kind of be this conscious consumer and try to step away from capitalism as much as I can. And, as a bleeding woman, like there's so many other things that go into not being paid equally. I, have to pay for all this other shit on top of just for existing with a
Mhm.
womb.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Well,
I'm curious, Jeff. Yeah.
Jeff, you mentioned in the last episode of your podcast, Protect Your Noggin, which I love, the concept of having a little bit of like socialism, right? Where we're just like everyone's got it covered. And then you could do a little extra work to get a little extra stuff, right? To go
Yeah.
on the trip, to buy the and that's what I would love to see, right? Is that we're
Mhm.
all getting this equal, because resentment is not being treated fairly. So if we're all treated fairly, and then we get to put in a little extra work to get a little extra things, like, yeah, but how do we get there? I don't know.
This is where Stacy and I on that podcast really we ended up, because we started out saying, well, the problem is the religions and the cults and all this, but ultimately, it was almost like sad for me to realize that actually I was so duped. It wasn't just that it was like a bad way of thinking about the transcendent. It was this whole thing had been hijacked by a power play, and I'd say you can call it capitalism, but it goes it goes back to the very origins 10,000 years ago of what we think of as civilization. And
Mm-hmm.
people, I think we should, the way we start thinking about it is to separate out the idea of society from civilization. Society is just your
Mm-hmm.
community, it's like your culture. Like these are good things. I'm resentful that I don't have a village. I don't have the safety net that even peasant ancestors would have had when you were struggling. People would come alongside you. Now we are all
Mm-hmm.
just scrambling for scraps. We're overworked. Like I'm saying, that's why I was sore. I chose this year to do, and I last couple of years to do what I love, working with these middle school students. Cuts my pay almost in half from what I would have been doing another situation. And I had to figure out, like, how am I going to do this thing that gives me life and I love it. The only way I can do it is now to work gigs in the evening, and I'm tired now, and I resent that. I'm achy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mad at the system, and I put on Rage Against the Machine, which the very name of that band, as some radicals, was to say, uh, no, like going to this idea of resentment. The worst thing we could do is say, oh yeah, everything's fine. Let's just like let's get along, or let's not talk about politics because politics is divisive. But yeah, but also. Um, we do need to get together as a society and say what is the revolution that we want. Hopefully it's nonviolent and spreads love and compassion to everybody. But at some point, there's I've got trans family members. I've got people that I like. A friend of mine who was almost shot by the cops. I got another friend who's black who was like clinically dead for a while because he got tased, not doing anything wrong.
Mm.
Like, so we get like angry about this, and then we, okay, let's be cool because it's good for us. There's this very nice suburban, um,
Mhm.
kind of new age space where almost that's not welcome, right? Like that kind of rage. And I think, okay, we start with the rage, but when you say drop out, like the whole point, while Stacy and I were working on this translation, we were I had the nice ability to have, over a course of 3 years, spent most of my time in a truck camper or in our Delica van, just traveling around the country, trying to figure out if it was possible to escape the system. And the horror, I don't want to end on a horror, so find some way to make it nice at the end. But the horror is, since 10,000 years ago, this is the dominant culture. It starts in like Mesopotamia. It starts with the god kings who said they were semi-divine beings, and they had to tame Tiamat, the woman, the womb, the ocean, the chaos dragon. And that's how you get civilization. So if we want to be safe and if we want to have food, we've got to suppress women as a fundamental mythology to all of Western society. I'll leave China outside of it. It's not just like accidentally sexist. It is, you absolutely have to have women as breeders and property if this game is going to be played. There
Mhm.
is no, that's for me then politically. I don't know what the answer is for y'all, but like for me, if you ask the question, what do we do? I don't know how to get there, but I do know, I think that the answer that the Tao Te Ching says, heck, even Jesus, the original, to the extent we can know what the original Jesus was, um, I believe that Lao Tzu and Jesus were what I would call spiritual anarchists. They did not legitimize the power of the state, of people
Mhm.
being owning you. So your husband doesn't own you, your dad doesn't own you, the government doesn't own you. If God exists, God doesn't own you. Nobody owns you.
Mhm.
This idea that you have to be owned by something or somebody, you have some kind of vow or allegiance to a state that cannot possibly care about you. Now that said, like, I, I don't know how you get there. So I'm always like open to like the democratic socialist like kind of angle. But
Mhm.
if you want to go political, the problem is, um, like, this Gavin Newsom down in California vetoes psychedelics, right? So like that's the Democrat version, right? So you basically have two pretend, like there's these two pretend parties debating about like how to run things, and one's going to be nice and give disempowered people a, little extra after school program, or we're going to have a charity that's going to help women in STEM sciences or something, not dealing with the hierarchy that's in intrinsic to the mythology of the whole culture. So the answer is,
Mhm.
yeah, I think we have to go on a cultural strike from the whole thing. That said, it is terrifying to me. I'm resentful. Like, no, nobody told me that we were going to just ruin the earth this fast, ruin
Yeah.
like human lives this fast. I mean, it's not pleasant. So as we were traveling around the country, we started to see firsthand the degradation of the environment. We were walking up to our knees in the Florida Keys because the water's coming up, and we saw just misery and hopelessness. And as long as you're just trying to slowly fix the sick system, it seems like, yeah, you really, you can't fix the sick system as it is. As
Mhm.
long as people are in that sense that somebody has to dominate somebody else.
Right. And that's why as much as it's scary, what we've been seeing happen over the course of the past 3 years or so, is the downfall of structures and societies. Like, that's terrifying. And to be like,
Yeah,
well, what does a good job look like? What does a good school look like? What does, like, it's terrifying, but I'm out here like, yes, because I know, like you said, you can't fix a broken system. The system has to be completely destroyed, it needs to burn to the ground. And whereas we want to give up, we have to just, I guess, I don't know, be freaking patient or something and just wait for it to keep burning and then say, okay, now that there's nothing left, let's have new eyes, let's have new souls, like step in and say, from the bottom, from what they call the bottom, I should say, this is what it's really like and this is what we really need, and hopes that because it all burned down, those who were at the top are now at least somewhat closer to us to make some change. That's what I'm hoping for, because otherwise,
yeah.
I don't know. Just
I'm
zap me to another dimension already, like,
oh,
here we go.
I know that watch one of the aliens, they were talking about aliens, like, "Oh, thank you. Aliens,
I
phew."
know.
Like, let's, like, get off this other narrative that we've got. I wanna try to, like, high five the hope part, but, in the when I study the history of, like, religion in society in America, and you look at the Salem witch trials, the hope that I get out of the Salem witch trials is that we think of it as everybody's being burned at the stake. They weren't burned, they were hung and other things drowned. But um, the way you could read that, if you were living there at that time, because sometimes very terrified and I don't want to be, but if you were living in Salem during the witch trials, you'd say, "Oh man, everything's out of control." Just the way I see everything out of control with reproductive rights being taken away and
Mhm,
anti-trans legislation. I mean, it is, it is scary for people that I love. It's just scary for humanity. But
mhm,
but the thing that we learned from the Salem witch trials is the reason the rhetoric got so hot is there was a bunch of white dudes that ran the thing, and then there was a bunch of girls who were like hanging out with their indigenous friends, their slave friends, and they were developing other magical practices. And this was a threat, so they heightened the rhetoric about how much of a threat this is, and then things got really intense. But as they say, the barn burns brightest before it collapses. And
mhm,
it doesn't have to be like a kind of violent Armageddon, but like um, the the fact is the reason we know this, the reason everyone's freaking out that is in power is because they are losing their power. People don't like that, and
mhm,
so of course, after you get Barack Obama in power, there's a bunch of people that are poor and white, and they don't know why, and they don't know why they don't get the American dream, and it must be Mexican immigrants or Black Lives Matter or the trans agenda, and they have to do that, just like the
mhm,
the the folks did. But the reason it was happening in Salem was because new ideas, Enlightenment ideas, were coming from Europe, and people were not going to ultimately buy into the ideology of the pastors. So they had to do that. So the key
mhm.
is we just don't be patient, but just learn how to be savvy and survive it because it can't last
Yes.
forever. It's gonna eat itself.
Yeah, and when it's the most chaos or when they're, like, pushing back, like you said, on trans right, on reproductive right, it's because in my perspective, or at least my hopeful perspective, is because they're losing,
Yeah.
and they're grasping at straws. And they're like, "Ah, we are losing control," right? So it's just like,
Mhm.
just keep pushing forward. Don't lose the momentum we have, but don't let this resentment and anger make us come through with violence, right? And that's the tricky part because we need to stand up for ourselves and we need to stand our ground, but feeding into that fear and violence is only going to give them back their power. So we just have to keep pushing this momentum forward because the reason they're going back on so much is because we're winning. We are getting somewhere. We are moving forward and they're freaking panicking. So like it's still scary and it's still like detrimental to our rights. Absolutely. I'm not trying to take away from that, but we're going somewhere. So like we just got to keep chugging along and have hope
And
and
emit
pray.
these good frequencies, right? Like that's what
Yes.
you're doing. Like that really is the medium of the podcast is people can laugh at it, but like it is there is a democratization to it. There is a way in which all you've got to do is just influence the listeners you have, the people in your immediate circles, and encourage them to keep doing the same thing. I think the hardest part right now is it doesn't feel like there's not enough of an organized movement. There were times in like the early 20th century where there was a very strong radical movement politically for workers. Um, Black Americans had arguably better experiences right after the Civil War than after the backlash when the KKK comes into it. So it's
Mhm.
not like something you can't really rest on your laurels. You've got to keep plugging away at it.
Yeah. I
So
see.
you learn, you unlearn, you learn some more, you
Mhm.
unlearn some more, and work on your energy because that is your superpower.
Yes, and it ripples out. We say it all the time. Your frequency, what you're admitting, is rippling and affecting everyone on a subconscious, on a cellular level, on every level. So just keep doing. And this is what, like, I try to tell myself is like, if I'm taking right action, that's all I can ask for. That's all I am capable of doing right now. And as far as like having that organization to make change, I see it in Gen Z. I just think they're too young
Yeah.
to have the resources right now. They and I'm not putting it all on you, Gen Z. We're right there with you. Tell me what resources.
We're
Yeah.
preparing the resources
I'm
for
like, tell me
you,
what
trust.
resources,
Yeah.
girl. Like, here it is. Like, but
Mhm.
they have they're all locked in. It's the new frequency in which they're being born in. They are
Mm.
so aware and they're like, looking at us like we're crazy. We've said it before. They're like, what do you mean you've been doing this for centuries? What are you crazy? That makes no sense, right?" So we got to keep setting the path. Something that I keep seeing in my visions lately is like every step I take is a step of 1,000 before me and 1,000 after me. So like everyone behind me has carved out the path and I'm still doing the work so the person in front of me has it a little bit clearer. So we just got to keep breathing and just like taking right action and aligned action for ourselves, not what society, not what our trauma, not what our toxic relationships are telling us to do, what your soul, what your heart is telling you to do. Because we're tapped into earth. We know what's got to get done. And that's what I got to say about that.
Here, here.
Anything else on resentment? I feel good. I felt good. Then I got a little angry. Now I feel calm. I feel like I've ridden the resentment wave. How y'all feeling?
Same.
Yeah, I was thinking that's exactly how it should be. I was like, hey, come on, Jeff, don't be your like, intense self. Like, we're gonna get into the frequency, right? But sometimes the
Hmm.
frequency gets a little fiery, a little feisty, because
Oh
that's
yeah.
all right. That's what we were saying at the beginning. You gotta get there and then
Yeah.
breathe it out.
And
So
it's
there you go.
honoring that. We've talked about sacred rage. It's honoring the anger, the discomfort, the resentment, and saying, like, yeah, this is a messenger. This is telling me something. It's fuel for change. So take that fuel to push you forward and say, I'm resenting this because something's not working. However I can voice this or take action to change that, whether it's my vote, whether it's my voice, whether it's where I spend my money, do the damn thing. Okay. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. This was lovely. I feel like now I want you on again because you just have such a beautiful perspective and so much experience that you're willing and open enough to share with not just us, but everyone who's listening. So thank you for being here.
Oh man, I'm
Yes.
so
Thank you,
excited. Thank
Jeff.
you very much. I appreciate it.
So please check out Protect Your Noggin. They're incredible. They're doing, hold on real quick. I got to plug in a
Mm,
little bit harder for you, Jeff, because
okay.
something you just said on your last episode was so beautiful. How you were just like, hey, I may not get to it every week because I got to do what's right for me. And I think as
Mhm.
content creators, Victoria and I have talked about it before, we're constantly pushed and we have to listen to our body and we have to listen to our
Yeah.
energy. And I love, and that's why I want to, not just you, but just your concept. I want to push that. Like, listen to Jeff because he's doing it when it's right for him, when it's right for them to move forward. And I think we need more content creators and people who are listening to their bodies. So thank you for doing that and sharing that with your people as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And if I may also say, you can kind of follow what my family does at dowsurfers.com. And that's TAO surfers, and that's where you can tap into like all these things we're trying to do is just to kind of recreate our lives outside of the old patterns, and it's not always easy, but that's kind of the hub of that. And as a warning, I do. I'm not really that embarrassed about any of the old books, but they're very boring. So, like, don't go spend the Oxford monograph, unless you're really into that topic. It's really boring, and really I just had changed so much of my perspectives. So everything that I wrote prior to Stacy and I doing the Tao Te Ching is interesting, perhaps, but only if you're really dialed into kind of some of those fine points of the history of the 16th century Christianity.
That classic learning and relearning, Jeff. We love
Yep.
to see
Yep.
it. Well, we'll leave his links below so you can find his podcasts and all of his other things going on. And please like, share, subscribe, and prescribe to your dose of frequency with Frequency Broads. We love you. Bye.